Hi everyone, welcome to today's seminar. My name is Sheena and I'm with CI Tutoring. So today we have our speaker, Miss Lucas. She is an experienced high school AP literature and AP seminar teacher. And she has been also working with College Board for the past 4 years as an AP exam scholar. So today she also in this summer, she will offer an introduction to AP literature class at CI Tutoring. So in today's webinar, she will share some information about the AP literature exam and also about the summer class. And by the end, we will have a Q&A section. So while we have our webinar going on, you can also type in your question in the Q&A box. We will start with the question parents put in the registration form first, and after that we will answer the questions from the Q&A box. So without further ado, let's welcome Ms. Lucas to start today's seminar.
Oh, hi. Hello, everyone. As Ms. Sheena just explained, I am going to be explaining our summer seminar class, and I just wanted to explain some of the things. So number one, about the class, we'll be talking a little bit about me and about my background, which kind of helps explain some of the reasons behind the class and how it was formed. Number two, we'll be talking about what's actually included in the class. We'll be talking about why your child should take this class, and also why they should take AP English classes in general. They kind of bleed together. And then finally, if there's any questions left over at the end, we'll definitely be taking some time to answer any questions that you guys have. So getting to kind of my more formal background. So when I was in high school, I qualified for the National Merit Scholarship Qualifying Test, which is a test you take in 11th grade in the fall. And it's basically similar, it is the PSAT. And when you take that 11th grade PSAT, it's actually plugged into the entire National Merit Program. And I scored within the top 5%. I went to a pretty good school, and they had a lot of SAT prep, and my parents did a really good job of making sure that we had the opportunities and had access to stuff like that. So by qualifying for that, I actually was accepted into the honors program at the University of Alabama on a full ride academic scholarship. And I ended up graduating from the Honors College with a degree in English and philosophy. While I was there, I accidentally stumbled onto Kaplan's test prep. They were offering a free LSAT, a law school admissions test. And I scored within the top 10% of that with this preparatory test that they offer for free to everyone on campus. And they ended up offering me a job to teach the LSAT. This started my sophomore year of college, and I ended up teaching. So this is why I have 8 years teaching. I started as a sophomore, and then a junior and a senior. I taught the law school admissions test for Kaplan to undergraduates and even graduate students. I remember there was this one history graduate student who was my TA, and he was in my Kaplan LSAT class. So this was a very, very good experience. During that time, I discovered a love for education, and especially a talent for being able to really, really figure out tests, basically, and teach them to other people and be able to describe them. I specifically was known for being really, really good at logic games. I had a law professor who was teaching us the philosophy of criminal law, and his daughter did terrible on logic games. And I recommended to him that I would help tutor her, and her score went up by 12 points just from tutoring with me for like 6 months. And after that, that was during my junior year. After that, I continued to have more people come to me to privately tutor, and specifically for logic games. This is all about the LSAT, but what it taught me in that moment, what I realized from way back in college, was that I had an ability to analyze tests, figure them out, figure out how points could be gained by other people. And from there, I was able to turn this into a career, basically. So after college, I ended up teaching public and then charter schools in Florida for 6 years. Needless to say, I was pushed toward a lot of the higher level courses because of these strong pass rates. I taught AP Literature, AP Seminar, ACE Thinking Skills, which is actually through the Cambridge ACE program as opposed to the AP program. I taught honors 10th grade ELA, which I had to teach them the 10th grade FSA to pass it, honors 8th grade ELA, which was teaching them the 8th grade FSA, and finally honors Greek mythology, which was just a fun class that I had a chance to be able to bring to my school for the first time. During this time, when I was teaching for 6 years in Florida, I, for 5 years in a row, won the Best and Brightest Award in Florida, which, in order to qualify for this award as a teacher, you have to have two things. Number one, an 80% pass rate, average in all your classes for that year. And number two, a pretty strong SAT score, which of course I already had, and I was able to just, go and get from College Board and send to them. So again and again, every single place that I worked, I discovered more and more that I just had this knack of being able to figure out what the test needed, and then from there, teach it to my students and continuously see the pass rates go up. Through this, I was able to, from that Best and Brightest, I was able to get in contact with some other people and network. And I was able to start working with the National Math and Science Institute, NIMSI, which is basically a third party nonprofit that partners with schools in order to help support education for students all around the country. And I ended up being at first a coordinator for them for my school. And then I ended up being a traveling trainer, which on the weekends and during the summer, I would travel to other schools around the tri-state area and basically help them on the weekends during these summer courses, other classes, their students raise their scores. And once again, it was, all based around like test prep and being able to get people good information. Through the NIMSI opportunity, I met other teachers who were also, becoming trainers, and I ended up getting recruited into College Board. College Board has been by far one of the best opportunities that I had because they hired me to be an AP scorer. What that means is once a year for a week or 2 weeks, we basically sit down and they give us 1,000 essays in 1 week to score for them. And we're continuously trained in what the rubric requires and what we're looking for different types of essays. And it's a very, very, rigorous training for what makes, something a 4, what makes something a 5, what makes something a 3. And it was able to teach me exactly what College Board is looking for. And then I was able to bring that to my students, which was another thing. It all just kind of ended up helping itself and rolling into itself. So all this to say, I have a lot of experience and a lot of background, both in breaking down highly rigorous tests, figuring out how to increase scores, and also really get a sense of how it works from both ends, how the schools do this, how NIMSI supports this, and how College Board actually scores this on their end when it's time to actually score the stuff. So it's also given me good opportunity to understand some of the differences that College Board has made in their tests during, from the 2019 test to the 2020, and how they're going to be implementing that from now on. So that is basically everything about me and everything about my background, just to give you an idea of where I come from with my philosophies and where I come from, why I do things the way I do. So let's talk about this class. What is this class going to cover in particular? So we're going to be basing everything around 3 units. This will be split over the 2 different sessions. Our first unit is the most basic and the most core. We're going to talk about thematic analysis. In other words, what is the author's purpose in writing this? This is always very specific to AP Lang and AP Literature, because all the other AP courses are going to teach you different types of skills, but fiction, AP Lang, AP Literature is always going to be based around why. Why did the author write it this one certain way? That's what the vast majority of their questions are always looking at. And it's also the thing that separates a lot of medium level scores to the high level scores. Has the student really shown true insight into the author's thematic purposes and how they accomplish this? So that is our base, that is our core skill that we're going to be working on initially, and everything builds out of that. If you can understand author's purpose, then the rest of this kind of flows together. Secondly, we'll be talking about how to pinpoint and how to prove our interpretation. Keep in mind, at any given time, you take a piece of classic literature like To Kill a Mockingbird, there's not only one answer, right? I mean, if I were to say, what is the theme of To Kill a Mockingbird? There are multiple themes. Some are definitely wrong, a lot are definitely right, but ultimately, the one that makes the highest score is the one that makes the most sense and the student has been able to argue efficiently. We'll talk about how to pinpoint and find the author's purpose. And then number two, how to prove your reading, your interpretation. After we talk about thematic analysis, we go into characterization and tone. So again, this has to do with how is the author characterizing certain things? How are they characterizing the characters? How are the setting? How is the action? How are they portrayed? That speaks to why the author did this a certain way. We'll also talk about different types of words that the author uses, how to pinpoint those, how to argue the subtle differences between them, and that has to do with tone. And then finally, in our last unit, we'll be talking about AP essay writing. So even though this is our last unit, it's actually the longest one. After we learn about thematic analysis and characterization, at that point, once we understand the concepts, we immediately want to turn around and start writing about them in an effective way. These are, great concepts to learn, and we'll start off, with just discussions and reading over stuff and analyzing. But the most effective and the biggest skill, the biggest way that we can help these students is not just teaching them the concepts, but teaching them how to write about them effectively. That is one of the biggest differences in the scoring of these AP English classes. 55% of every AP English class, your total score was in the free response, was in the writing responses. So they put a more of a weighted, balance on writing over the multiple choice, over any other skill that you have. So in our essay writing, we'll be talking about four things in particular. Number one, how to analyze an AP prompt. I'm not going to lean into this too hard. I just want to give them a, kind of general familiarity, because this is going to get more specific when they get to those classes. But we will be looking at them and giving like a cursory idea, just again, a vague familiarity, so they won't be scared of them later on. But we don't need to get too deep into it when they still have a couple of years off. We'll keep it kind of general. However, the fast break introduction, we will definitely be discussing, because this is something that they can use everywhere. A fast break introduction is a certain type of introductory paragraph that basically covers universal concept, like introducing the topic, the larger context and proving that you have some expertise in speaking over it, and then very quickly an insightful, powerful, preferably complex thesis. And we'll talk about complexity more and why that's so important in AP classes, proving that, especially in your intro. But we can do this in such a way that even being packed with this much information, we can do it in, 3 sentences, at most 4. And sometimes kids get so good that they can do it in 2 sentences flat. And that's when we have real mastery. Regardless, we'll be introducing these concepts and kind of making sure that they understand how to do this, and then they'll be able to practice it multiple times. After our introductory and that, strong structure to an introductory paragraph, we'll be talking about Tolman paragraphs, which are a certain way of approaching using your evidence and your explanation and your body paragraphs. And then we'll finally be talking about mic drop conclusions, I like to call mic drop, which is where we have a conclusion that hits in a certain way and that has a certain resonance to it. Again, trying to prove that sophistication. Part of what we always try to prove in our essays is that a student has reached a level of mastery, or quote unquote sophistication in order to get that last point out of the 6-point rubric. There's certain ways to do that in your intro and in your conclusion that we as College Board readers are taught to look for, and I'm going to turn around and teach my students how to do. So again, these are the 3 units: thematic, analysis, theme, moral of the story, characterization, how does the author characterize things, and then finally the essay writing. Along with all of these, we'll be sprinkling in lots of other skills and information, including the 3 types of irony, embedding textual evidence, rhetorical devices, diction, figurative language, poetry, and classical literature. So one of the big differences between AP Lit and almost any other English or literature or AP class out there is they have poetry. On AP Lit, an entire essay out of the 3 that you do is on poetry. So you have to get the kids used to reading and unpacking poetry. And that's going to be one of the main areas that we kind of lean toward. How do you read it? How can you interpret? How do you write about it? Once again. We'll also be working with some real AP prompts. Again, not too many because I want to keep it nice and general. I don't want to get too narrow in on any of these things because I know a lot of them have a ways off. But the idea that they've seen this before, they don't have to be scared of it if they get introduced to it, later on in those classes when they first start. They can be like, yeah, no big deal. I totally did this back in 8th grade. I've seen this before. And it's all about building that confidence, We'll be talking about some Greek mythological allusions, one of my favorite classes always. And then most importantly, this class will cover individual writing feedback. And what I mean by that is that every time I give an assignment, I will be looking over it and I will be personally telling your student, your child, here's what we're good at, keep doing this. Here's what we can maybe work on, this is the way. And then here's what, do not do this under any circumstances. This is a bad habit. And that's what we'll be sussing through early so that they know what to work on, what to keep doing right, and then what to try to avoid even before they ever start these classes. So why should my student take this course? Needless to say. Well, a couple of reasons. Number 1, AP classes are designed to be fast-paced and cover lots of material. Trust me, I definitely know. At any given time when we are first introducing these concepts to students, I've seen this in my class, immediately we have this idea that it's like the first time you introduce it, they're going to try to write about it and it's not going to be that convincing because they're not that confident yet. They've never seen this before and they're going to try. Then you introduce it a second time and now, okay, all right, I kind of remember this. I sort of know how to talk about it. And by the time they see it for the 3rd time and need to write about it, you can tell they're starting to build a lot of confidence and they understand how to approach these topics. For our purposes, prior knowledge is always something that allows students to sharpen their skills. Your children, these students, are going to be able to sharpen and understand these things while other students are still on that first attempt. While they're still just gaining familiarity, your student will be like, yeah, I know all about irony. Yeah, I know all about Tolman paragraphs. I know about these things before they're ever being explained. And that means by the time they get explained in the classes, they'll be able to hit the ground running a lot faster. At any given time, the more times a student is exposed to a concept, the more confidently they write about it. Also, speaking, kind of referring back to what I was talking about before with that individual feedback, most AP teachers, assuming they have, either between 2 and 3, maybe even 4 sections of a given class, they're going to need to grade 100 essays, right? A lot of times. I know for me, I had only 3 classes and I easily had somewhere between 80 to 90 essays to grade every single time I assigned an essay. Now, what did that mean? That meant that I'm going to turn around and I'm going to try to help my students. I'm going to do the best I can. I want my students to succeed, but I can't give individual feedback the way that I could if this class was much, much smaller, like this class will be. I can offer that individual feedback. I can give more information to these students and be able to make sure that they know every single thing that they can work on in order to improve their scores. Um, which is going to ultimately allow them to know how to improve. The unfortunate thing is a lot of times, a teacher will be like, "Oh, okay, yeah, that you did good, good, done, A, whatever." Next, you didn't do good, B, you did really bad, C, and then they don't know how to improve. They don't know what they can technically work on. Even an A paper, there are things it's like, okay, well, we could have used an example of irony, or we could have used a more complex thesis. There are lots of different little tricks that can always help improve a score later on when that College Board scorer is sitting there looking at it. um, so even a strong paper without feedback is a missed opportunity. So that's one of the things that this class is going to allow these students to get individual feedback, no matter what level they're at, in order to be able to continue to improve, sharpen, and to know what to be able to knock out when it is their turn. And then finally, one of the main reasons, not all AP teachers actually know how College Board scores. I, for one, know how difficult it was. The initiation process of getting into College Board was actually it was pretty lengthy, and I had several people that ultimately were able to network and vouch for me. But it was a bit of an uphill battle at first when I first found out about it. It's not terribly common for an AP teacher to necessarily have experience being a College Board scorer. The teacher that I worked with, I did AP Lit, and the other one in the charter school who did AP Lang, she had been teaching for over 15 years AP Lang, and she had never been uh, offered a position with College Board. And I remember her talking about it and realizing later on that after we had discussed some of the things, how it ultimately got graded. And she actually ended up adjusting some of the things that she was doing and how she was teaching her students, which is great because then our entire program actually got stronger from there. But it really opened my eyes to the fact that you can guess, and you can take a as best as you can, look at your previous scores in your class. But until you've been on the other side and seen how these things actually get trained, actually are regimented, it's difficult to know what to actually give advice in. So that's something that's also going to be that's going to be available to these students. Um, and also my children, which I'm very, very grateful for. It was a great opportunity. All right, college application. So I know it's probably a little bit early to be talking about this, but we always have to keep in mind, according to the Princeton Review, admission counselors all agree that good grades and rigor are the most important factors when schools evaluate applications. So what does that mean for us? What does that mean for you? Not only is it important for, children who want to be competitive to be in AP Lit, to be in AP Lang, to be in these types of courses, right? But it's also important to make good grades while they're there. This is, again, why there's so much importance on that prior knowledge, that the first time your child is exposed to a characterization unit or poetry or irony or, whatever it be, all of these different types of elements, they're going to be able to come in and say, I've already heard about this. I already understand how this works. And they're going to be able to immediately have that head start of that initial understanding. That's going to end up helping out their grades while they're taking these classes. From the very get-go, again, these classes are designed to cover a lot of ground very quickly, and at any given time, a student can easily begin to trip up over things, and if they're not able to figure out and bounce back and include it later, it can cause some issues, at any given time. I had that happen, unfortunately, with a couple of students that even though later on they were able to make strong scores during the year because they had struggled, their actual grade in the class maybe wasn't as strong as their ultimate AP score was. And that was very unfortunate. So being able to have both a strong AP score, excuse me, I'm sorry, and the actual high scores to be able to turn in the same motion are part of what looks so good on the college applications, depending on like the program, especially. Also college level skills. So all of the things that are expected to be learned in college: time management, critical thinking, scholarly writing. These are skills that are, expected in college. They're expected in their AP classes, and they will be expected here. And so it all kind of builds onto itself. As they learn to do this, they'll be able to do it better. Not just the actual knowledge and information, but the understanding of how to knock out these things in a scholarly fashion, to use, critical analytical thinking for literature, which isn't something that always comes, that people necessarily always think along those lines for literature. Being able to do those will align very nicely with, here, and then those classes, and then later on, tying into college later. And then finally, so the SAT subject tests, they are officially gone. That is another reason. That's why this is so important. So before January 19th of this year, students had 3 different ways that they could get college credit during high school. They could either take an AP class, they could do an SAT subject test, or they could go dual enrolled. Any one of these were good options that allowed the student to be able to knock out some college credit, show some skill level, and be able to continue on. The SAT subject tests are now gone, leaving only 2 options. You can either do the AP classes, or you can do dual enrolled. There are, and don't get me wrong, dual enrolled is definitely an option, but at any given time, when a student, takes those dual enrolled classes and takes them to a rigorous university or any sort of competitive program, they're essentially saying, I have a credit from a community college, versus another student who says, well, I took an AP class, I made this score on the exam, and I made this grade in the class. Both of which look better. I mean, the truth of the matter is College Board and AP classes tend to be the gold standard for these sort of things. There are other options, but at any time that we're looking at trying to be, the best on our college application, the fact of the matter is the SAT subject tests tend to be, somewhere in the middle, and, the AP was the best, and now that subject test is gone. So all we're left with is the 2. So that's another reason that I know I definitely encourage all of my students and my little 8th graders when they were 8th graders. And also I will definitely be making sure that my children take AP classes. Again, just to make sure that they have those strong college resumes. So finally, why should my student take this course? At its most basic level, AP classes are designed in order to let students showcase their skills through a challenging course. They know for a fact AP classes are designed to cover a lot of ground, to cover a lot of different topics and subjects and examples. And they're going to look later on, how did this student score on their exam? What did it all come to? And then what were their grades like in those classes while they were taking them? This class, this summer, is going to allow your student to have a head start in those skills. Basically, it's going to get them off the blocks a little faster. And then later on, when when the actual class starts, whether it be APEng, AP literature, whatever it is, they're going to have that little bit of a, forward momentum going in, that previous familiarity, while everyone else is just getting started. So those are the basic reasons, the most straightforward ones. So now it is time for the question and answer. If you have any questions that were not answered here, please feel free to type it into the chat room. Questions will be answered to the best of my abilities in the order received, and we can start going over those. So Ms. Sheena, did you want me to go ahead and start with the first couple of questions?
Yeah, we can start with the question parents type in while they register for this webinar. So yeah, you can start with those first.
All right. Okay, so we got a couple of really, really good questions beforehand. So first one, a specific literature, what specific literature is covered during this course? So a lot of what we've tried to cover, again, I've got kind of a mixture of some poetry and some actual like literary excerpts. We are going to be covering Langston Hughes, which, you know, classic poet, Julius Caesar, specifically Mark Antony's speech, mixing in a little bit of, you know, Shakespeare. We want to get at least one example of a play in there. The nice thing about Shakespeare is whenever you do a Shakespearean play, you're almost kind of doing poetry and literature in the same motion, because a lot of times, you know, they rhyme and there's a certain like rhyme scheme to it. And they tend to be very dense and packed like poetry is, that you kind of have to sit down and decipher them and interpret them. But it still has that, you know, large literary quality of, you know, going through the different elements of the story. So all that to say, we'll be covering an excerpt from Julius Caesar, which kind of works in two different ways. We'll also be covering The History Teacher, Richard Cory, and Ozymandias, all of which are poetry. Again, poetry is one of the biggest things. If you can get a student used to poetry and analyzing it, it only really serves to help them think about literature, because poetry is it's kind of like a mini story. It's like a mini book, and it helps them practice so many of these skills. What is the author's purpose? How can we get at it? What is their tone? What is their word choice? What different figurative language elements are they using? All of which are things that need to be applied to all of the different AP literature essays, as well as the critical thinking sort of things that you covered in AP Lang, while getting them used to poetry, which a lot of times, again, a lot of English classes don't necessarily stress a whole lot. And it tends to be this like uphill battle for people. And then finally, we'll be covering the Telltale Heart, which I'll be figuring out for my students ahead of time if they've already done the Telltale Heart, because some have. Then we'll probably be switching that out for a different piece instead. Probably still something by Edgar Allan Poe, though. It's a good one to cover. So excellent question. Again, it'll be a balance between some excerpts from some books, some poems, so that we can get full pieces, and then also something by Edgar Allan Poe, just depending on what people have already covered. Next up, which AP literature exam book can you recommend to buy for my kid? I love this question. This question is so smart, and just already trying to think ahead. I love it. Number one, don't get Barron's. Whatever you do, don't get Barron's. Barron's has this wonderful habit of putting on their multiple choice these different questions that aren't ever on the exams at all. Like for example, they'll do something about the ice scheme versus rhymes. I don't know. They get really into the types of very obscure poetry questions that maybe on the entire exam might be like 2 or 3 questions out of like 55, and they love to put like multiple chapters for every single one of these things. And I'm like, they pick the most obscure things and then proceed to spend half of the book on it. And yeah, Barron's. Okay, so I'll just say Barron's. Don't get Barron's. Barron's is the worst. On the opposite end, Princeton Review. It's the gold standard for everything. Honestly, I cannot sing Princeton reviews like I cannot begin to explain how awesome. Whatever their latest edition is, always get that one. They're always updating it. They have a great team. I would honestly suggest them for any of the AP English classes. Princeton Review, they're solid. Next one, do you think reading classical literature such as Great Expectations will help students to perform well on the AP English exam? Yes, I do. I very much do. So there is 3 different writing essays that are required for AP Lit. One of them is reading a piece of poetry. One of them is reading a piece of a fiction or possibly a play. And then the last one is the open-ended question, which is write about a book you've read. And every single time, the book always has to be something, they'll have a list of books. And so it'll be like, for example, write about a story that you read that, involves, I don't know, like an illuminating moment for the characters or something. There's lots of different topics that they come up with. Or maybe it's something like, write about a book that involves a coming of age story for a character, and, what you notice the transition of the main character, from beginning to the end, something like that. And then they'll have a list of all the different books you could think of that, or that students might have read that would apply to this prompt. And then at the end, they always have, or a similar book of literary merit. Now, that is where we bring in great expectations. That is where, if your student has already had a backlog of great literature pieces that they've covered before, then they're going to be able to flip through and, go, can I write about To Kill a Mockingbird? Can I write about Julius Caesar? Can I write about Macbeth? Can I write about, and at any given time, they're going to be able to sit there and go, oh, Heart of Darkness, that'll work great for this prompt, and then they sit down and they write their essay based on a book that they've read previous to. This is a great way to get kids started early on, get them started reading the classics as early as they can, and try to get them thinking after they read these classics. Again, what is the author's purpose? How was everything characterized? How can I write about this in a convincing way? My interpretation in a persuasive type essay. So this is a great question, and I would definitely suggest at any given time, you can always look into books of literary merit. That is always the way College Board describes it. There's lists all over the place. You can check that out and start seeing they have like just pages and pages, hundreds of books that, they kind of qualify as literary merit. And Great Expectations is definitely on the list. Next up, which section do students lose most points on: reading comprehension or writing? Writing. So at any given time, it is always split. 55% goes to writing, 45% goes to multiple choice. Those are the way that it's split and the way that it's scored and weighted. So at any given time, if I had to choose between a student that was a strong writer versus a strong test taker, I would always put my money on the strong writer. Especially if they know those handful of skills, to make sure that they get that extra sophistication point, that they're going to get that extra, evidence and elaboration point. A student who makes a 4, 5, or 6 on their essays and then proceeds to, maybe get 30% right on the multiple choice is always going to do stronger than a student who's consistently hitting like 3s or maybe occasionally a 4 on their essays and then gets like 60% right on multiple choice. It's very rare that people get over 70%. Again, there's so many of these obscure questions on the multiple choice that, tends to, but they keep that in mind. There's a very large, kind of sliding scale for these. The writers, the kids who are strong writers always tend to do better. They kind of purposely lean at that direction. So hopefully that answers that question. And then finally, do you have any suggestions for how to improve students' performance in the reading comprehension and the writing section? Yes, I have a ton of different suggestions. Just binders and binders full of them. But if I was going to just very quickly answer, make it quick, for reading comprehension, on any standardized test, my number one tip is read the questions first, then back up and read the actual reading selection that they gave you. That is my number one tip. If you know the questions ahead of time, oh, I need to pay attention on line 15 through 17. Oh, I need to notice in paragraph 3. Oh, okay. They're going to ask me about this particular word and what it means. So as you're reading that first time through, you already know what they're looking for, and that's going to help narrow in very quickly. And also, it turns it into a treasure hunt. A lot of times students can get a little bored in reading comprehension, and they can, drift off, get lost, especially, if they have any sort of like test anxiety. I've noticed that a lot. Sometimes my strongest students, when it actually comes down to, the time to like, okay, we're going to take like a practice test, they have this really bad habit of I'll sit there and watch them. Like they'll read, stop, reread, stop, reread, and I'm like, go to the questions. If you start with the questions, you know what to pay attention for, and it kind of makes it fun. It's like they're looking for the information that they've already started over here. So that's my number one for reading comprehension. Writing, my number one suggestion for writing is figure out how to do a quick intro and a quick conclusion, and then from there, the 85% of your energy needs to be going into the body paragraphs, evidence and elaboration. With AP literature, ever since they've switched over from the 9-point grading scale to the 6-point grading scale in 2020, 4 out of 6 points is evidence and elaboration. You get 1 point for having a thesis, which basically everybody gets that point. I'm not kidding. You get 1 point for sophistication, which again, that is something that there's a handful of tricks that we can teach them to look for. And then you get 4 points, a possible of 4 points out of 6 for evidence and elaboration. So if you can teach a student how to knock out their intro, finish, get started, knock out their conclusion, show some insight, so, show some larger implications, you're done. They know to put the vast majority of their energy into those body paragraphs, they're going to be able to do a lot stronger. But it's just a matter of, teaching them that structure and getting them comfortable with it. So yeah, very good questions. Hopefully that answers everything. Do we have any more questions?
Yes, we have a question in the Q&A box. A parent asked, how is AP literature different from AP language, and what skills from AP language are used in the AP Lit?
So AP language uses a lot of, they're going to be going over rhetorical devices. They're going to be using more like speeches and nonfiction, where AP literature is kind of geared more towards, poetry and literature and fictional writing. What is going to transfer over is that familiarity with literary terms. So so for example, if a person is using irony in a speech, that's something you can write about. If a person is using irony in a poem, that's something you can write about. Metaphors, similes, personification, all the rhetorical devices, all of those literary terms. Number one, being able to recognize them. Number two, being able to write about them. And then finally, three, being able to do it in a confident, sophisticated way that transfers to both. Greek mythological allusions transfers to both. Having a sense of being able to quickly knock out a convincing essay is going to go through both. AP Lang is scored on that same 6-point rubric. Do they have a thesis? Do they have plenty of evidence and elaboration? And then do they have an element of sophistication? So in some ways, they're highly similar. The skills is particularly learning to spot things and learning to write about them. Does that answer the question?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and I've found another question from the registration form. I guess the parents submit late. The parents asking, are the AP literature reading and the writing sections similar to the SAT reading and the writing? And if not, which one is harder?
I would say so AP literature is probably harder. It sort of depends. So the SAT reading comp, they have more stuff about grammar in particular. I will say that. So there's lots of various things where, did you need a comma here? Would a semicolon work? So there's certain grammar elements, and AP literature does not cover grammar. There's not even really a spot on the writing rubric for grammar, and certainly the multiple choice doesn't really cover it. What the multiple choice covers in AP Lit and AP Lang are, again, those figurative terms and the ability to analyze for author's purpose, for characterization, for basically, when this author said this, what did they mean? What were they trying to get across here? What was they always talk about, oh, what's that term? There's a certain term that they use for everything where it's always regarding the author's use of uh, figurative language, right? Or on AP Lang, the author's use of rhetorical language. And they're always, they'll point you to a certain line and they'll be like, what is this an example of? Or what does this, line by this character, what does this show about this character? And it's all about analyzing for this particular tone, or for that larger structure. When we see this, what does this show you about this character? Or when we saw this line, what type of conclusion was this? And so they're just different. They're very, very different. I would say as long as a student is good at analyzing for literature and for fiction, then they're going to have a relatively easy time with AP Lit. And as long as they have a strong grasp of grammar and reading comprehension, they're going to have a relatively easy time with SAT.
I see. I see. Yeah, I think that's all the questions I have for today. If you have if for the parents or students, if you have more questions, you can type in the chat box.
Okay.
But I haven't.
Let's see. I did see something in the chat room. Yes, and then how is AP Lit different from AP Lang?
Yeah, that's the same question I have. Yeah, so yeah, I think that's about it for today. And thank you very much for your time to have this webinar, like excellent webinar, and also the information you share with us. And thank you all the parents and students take the Sunday night to join us. If you have more questions about the exam or any of our program, you can feel free to email us. Our email is info@citutoring.com, and also you can call us at 925-428-3229. I think that's about it. We can end the meeting a little bit early today. So yeah, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, I will